In the previous lesson, we continued to talk about materials and we talked about the tiling of the texture and how we can do the mapping in the first way, which is through the Redshift material node or through the shader graph and using the constant or using again the texture node in the material right here. So we have the first remapping tools like the scale, the offset, where we can set up our texture. And we use also texture for the roughness, the bump effect, and the displacement. Now we saw that the bump effect, it's a fake 3D effect. Also, we can use the normal. We need to set it up here using this node. And then we use the displacement, which is a real 3D effect. And we are seeing this effect right now. And it's right here on these planks. And also we talked about the alpha channel or opacity channel, which makes an object capable of passing the light through and projecting shadows based on the material texture, which is going to be white and black, and the white is going to be the visible part and the black the invisible part. So you can basically apply any graphics to the opacity to have this effect. Now we also introduced the RS object tag, which is an extra tool of Redshift that will help you to define many things about the objects. One of these things is the displacement. So you need to also activate here in the geometry, the tessellation and the displacement. So if I turn off the tessellation, so I don't subdivide a 3D surface or 3D solid, well, in that case, you can see it's going to be looking flat, even though you're using the displacement. And if you deactivate the displacement here, if you don't enable it, again, it's going to look flat. You can see even more flat. So it's really important to adjust the bump or the displacement effect directly in the shader graph and also with the Redshift object tag. Now I'm going to insert again the bump map. So I don't want to use the displacement because displacement is a pretty heavy effect. So um, I'm going to go here, geometry, and use the bump map directly. So that's going to just simulate the 3D, which is fine for most of the time. So you can see it's just simulating the 3D effect. So make sure all the textures are synchronized. You can use the mapping right here in Redshift using the constant or other utilities. But also you can use the mapping in Cinema 4D. You can use other mapping tools that we're going to see in this video. So previously we used this scene here from Sketchfab, which is called the floaty tiny home. And then we also used before this orc from TurboSquid, which we're gonna use also in this video. And I'm going also to download some materials that don't have like an undefined mapping, but they have like a precise Unwrap map, like these models from Polyhaven right here. So we're gonna study also how we can do a little bit of packaging, product design, product visualization, and how we can set up, modify some textures, apply. Um, well, we saw how we can apply textures, but we can also see how we can apply graphics. You cannot do the mapping using only Redshift. Well, the Unwrap mapping at least. So you can do this with a specific software like Substance, or you can do it also in Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D has some tools to do some specific mapping like Unwrap mapping, but also you can use some mapping tools that I'm going to show you. And also, of course, you can use it for packaging and creating product design, product visualization. So you need software for this. We only have few tools in Redshift directly that we can use. So all the others you need to use some software like Cinema 4D or 3ds Max if you're using 3ds Max, or Substance, or others that you may find. So we can do just visualization essentially in Redshift, except for some little nodes that I'm going to show you for the mapping. We already saw something about the tiling, and we mainly can work with repeatable texture. So we explain a little bit about the mapping, which is the process of applying a 2D image. So x and epsilon dimensions are here called the u and the v. So we apply a 2D image onto a 3D object. So this operation sometimes can be tricky. We need to have mapping and a UV map ready to use. Otherwise, we need to figure out how to fix it in the software that we're using. In this case, we're going to see Cinema 4D and REDSHIFT. And we saw that we can use some textures that can be tileable, some others are less tileable. Usually the nice textures is flat, doesn't have dark or bright spots. And so you can understand now the difference between tileable, non-tileable, so repeatable, non-repeatable. And so also when you use a texture unwrap, that's good for packing or packaging because it's basically you are unpacking that 3D object into a 2D image. That's the process of unwrapping. So we're gonna see more about this later on, but just to recap, and so I'm downloading here I want to download this in FBX format, and so also we can test different formats. I saved everything in a folder called polyheaven, and then you need to extract everything, the object and the 2D maps. In this case, these are unwrapped maps. These are not um, tiling texture or tileable texture. So, and this is going to be this other one, a GLTF. So we can test both. We can see which one works best with Cinema 4D and REDSHIFT. So I'm back in the scene here in the floating tiny house. I am in a bedroom here, and you probably see some objects that are already mapped with the Unwrap, and all the others, all the materials usually used for architecture, they use the tiling. So I want to search for a picture frame in the asset editor, and I want to just drop it in. Or I can just create a plane actually. So just created a plane here, and I want to position this inside this room just to show you first that an example of what a non-repeatable texture can be. So I'm going to change the orientation of this plane. And if you're interested in Cinema 4D, you don't know how to use it, you can check the Cinema 4D course. So I want to give a precise size to this panel, and this is now 1 meter times 1 meter. And I want to apply an image. So I usually use raw pixel because it has a lot of public domain images that I can use. And you can get it from here, or you can access directly raw pixels. Let's see something interesting here. Well, just, you can use any image. All these images cannot be repeated unless they are some sort of like wallpaper or for any other graphic, like artistic graphic or whatever. You cannot use repeatable. And also you can see the size and the dimensions, the width and the height. That's important to give the correct proportions also to your 3D objects. So in this case, the 3D object matches the image resolution and proportions mostly. So I'm going to download this cat image and I want to apply it right here. Now, a quick way to do this is just to drag and drop the texture directly onto the 3D object. Well, in this case, it doesn't look, it looks upside down, but I can fix it. First of all, let's fix the proportion. So I need to scale this. So if I either scale the object or I start to crop the image. And if I convert this to editable, I can resize it with the scale. Otherwise, if it's not editable, I need to go inside the object parameters inside this panel right here and adjust the width and the height so that it matches the image. So either you match the image with the object or you match the object with the image, and you do some cropping. Now we do have some mapping tools right away. We have some tags here, but if we click on the material, that's where you can find the actual mapping tools for Cinema 4D. So I'm going to show you, instead of using REDSHIFT tiling or REDSHIFT nodes that you can use directly Cinema 4D, you can change the projection, which is basically how you project the image onto the object, which could be cylindrical or spherical, depending on your object essentially. Or it can be UVW mapping. So in that case, you already have a mapping on the object. But if you don't have a mapping, you need to proceed with other tools because not every time you're going to have a mapping. Now let's keep UV mapping for now because this is a Cinema 4D plane, so it does have a mapping, and we can